our Thursday guest member talk with Patricia Raskin today. And as I was saying earlier, Patricia's a really good friend of mine. I've known her a long time, and she's extremely talented. She knows so much about the media world and the broadcast world. And she's recently moved into podcasting over about the last year or so. And she's had tremendous success with it. Her clients are really happy. And so I'm sorry we could not get on Facebook Live, technical problems. We have that almost every single week with Facebook Live. But Patricia's here today to inform us all about the fine art and science of podcasting. So Patricia, you want to start in, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about podcasting.
Well, thank you. A lot of people aren't really sure what a podcast is. They listen to them, but then when you ask them, they say, well, what is it? I've been in broadcasting independently for several decades now. My background is education and psychology, and I started doing cable TV and radio, and then internet, and then broadcast TV and broadcast radio. And it was a progression. It became from sort of a hobby and avocation to a business. And really what a podcast is it's anything that is delivered electronically by sound. And that would also be in the same category as radio today, because radio now broadcasts electronically, which means that you can hear it on your phone, you can watch it on the computer. Anytime it's broadcast in that way, it becomes a podcast. Okay. So you're going to say to me next, well, then what's the difference between a radio show and a podcast? Well, I've done radio shows on broadcast radio, and I've done them on different modalities, and certainly podcasts now and internet radio. The main difference is that when you're on a broadcast station like ABC, CBS, whether it's television or radio, you are working with an entity, with a conglomerate that has certain rules and regulations. Right. You're following FCC regulations, you're following their prescription, if you will. They have timing, they have sponsors, so you're following within that realm. When you do something like a podcast, it's like writing a book. Unless you have a specific formula, and there are some formulas, you really are on your own. So the reason that people love podcasts, because they're easy to do. They're easy in terms of the barrier of entry is low, but you also have tremendous creativity, and you're not being censored by the FCC, so you can say and do what you want. Having said that, if you just come on and do anything, you're going to lose listeners. So what you really need to do is have a very strong platform. You have to be able to meet the needs of the audience. So what is it you really want to share, and what is it mostly that you want to share that they need?
Exactly.
So you might come on there and tell me a great story about coaching an executive, and that may be great, but it may not be what your audience needs, because that story may not pertain.
Exactly.
So when you're creating a podcast, it's like creating a book. You come up with, well, first of all, what do I want out of this? What do I want? Do I want A, to be able to make money? Do I want B, to increase my client base? Do I want C, to become a well-known broadcaster? Do I want D, to just get to know people through the network so I can have them on my show? What do I want?
Right.
And once you answer what you want, then you got to go to the win-win equation. What do they need? This is what I want, but what do you need? It's like saying to a company, here's what I want. And they say, yeah, but this is what you want. This is what we need. Right. So the perfect combination is when you create the win-win. And in this case, the win-win is, what does your customer need? So I'm going to give you just an example. If I were going to do a podcast today and my whole thing is positive living and positive thinking. And I don't do my podcasts on that. I interview experts on many different fields in health and wellness. But if I want to do a podcast today and I decided to set it up on positive living, probably I would focus on the elephant in the room. And what is that? It's the coronavirus. So I can't do a podcast on positive living without bringing that in, because that's affected everything. So in my podcast, I will talk about my points of positive living and what I think is important, but I will talk about it in the framework of what we're doing in terms of this new normal. And so that's what I mean, because that's what people want to know. I mean, I'm doing many corporate webinars right now on how do you cope with COVID-19? How do you talk to the children? How do you talk to seniors? How do you communicate more effectively? How do you get around social distancing? How do you use social media? So the point is that this is what you want to do when you create a podcast.
So
now,
let me ask you a question. So how can our audience here benefit from working with you? Because podcasting is part of an entire marketing strategy. So as you know, people have to have, they have to be present in a lot of different modalities, and podcasting is another really good way to reach out, as you were describing. So how do these people get benefit from working with you and creating a podcast?
That's a good question, and thank you for asking that. I think, first of all, I just want to say, before I answer that question, there are about 1 million podcasts right now. So right there's an answer. An answer is, there's so many. How do I make myself different? So what I do, and it's interesting because right now, what I seem to be focusing on, what the needs seem to be for my client, is not immediately jumping into doing a podcast. They basically are scheduling coaching sessions with me where we actually look at just the things I said to you. What do you want to do, Mary? Why do you want to do it? Where's the need? What would your subject topics be? Who would your guests be? What would your stories be? So even before we then set out the podcast, I'm offering coaching packages at a reduced rate of four coaching packages, 4 coaching sessions for an hour each. And we go through that. And clients are finding it very helpful because they're saying, wow, this isn't just such a big mountain. Now, when it comes to, am I going to then create this podcast? Then you have your base already set. And even if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to do a podcast, you can write a blog. You can write a short story. You can use it for a talk. I mean, there are many ways that you can go.
So you're talking about what you developed with the client as far as their content. So
their content, their stories, their delivery style. It's more, content's important, but it's how do you make that interesting? And the story is what compels the listener to listen. When you think, I mean, if I asked you right now, Mary, think about a motivational speaker you listen to or someone you heard recently that you love. You might give me a name. And if I said to you, what do you remember? You're probably going to remember the story they told rather than the point. You'll remember this amazing story. And that is what compels people. Right now, you might say, well, isn't this a lot of work? Well, there's work in anything that you do. That's why it's good if you can get professional help. It's like doing a website. You can create your own website. But most people want to do what they're doing best. I always say to people, do what you do best and leave the others. Leave to the rest of us who have the expertise.
Focus on your core competency.
Absolutely.
And what you can't do, like create a website or create a really compelling podcast, you need to bring in an expert that knows how to help you tell your story.
Right. And now I have probably interviewed in my career, if you add it all up, I was thinking about it the other day, it's probably 5,000 people. I've been doing this a long time, over years and years and years. So, and what I always remember, again, is the compelling story. And the other thing, of course, the factors are your tone, your voice tone, your pitch, your speed. And if you're watching online, and you can certainly watch a podcast online if you use YouTube, because YouTube will do that for you. And it's easy to do it if you do your podcast on Zoom because you can videotape it.
Exactly.
So that's another way to go.
So let me ask you this: what makes a compelling story?
I probably ask that to you or my listeners. What makes it compelling? What makes it compelling is it's either heartwarming or it's heart-wrenching, right? It's unusual. It's special. I'm going to give you a story, and I don't even know why I'm mentioning this story because it's not a good one, but I just saw it on the news last night, and it was you couldn't help, you just couldn't help but really think about it. It's a young Black woman who was in a car. Did you see this on the news?
No,
Unbelievable. She was in, God, I have to remember. I think it was Louisiana. I could be wrong, and if who's ever watching can correct me. But it had to be maybe, I don't know, her 20s, maybe 30s. She was in a car with her niece, four children, all girls, from ages 6 up to like 16. She went into a convenience store and came out. When she came out, she stopped the car, and there were police around her, and they were actually holding weapons. And they said to her, "This is a stolen car." And she said, "No, it's not." They did not ask her for license or registration. They put the little one on the ground, 6 years old, with the little crown on her head. And this created, you can imagine the trauma. Well, it's all over the news. And now apparently the police have apologized, but they didn't apologize enough. And the woman is traumatized. The point is, and they're calling it racism, whatever it is, but you remember that story. Why? Well, because it's sort of one in a million. Now, of course, she said, if I wasn't Black, if I was white, this wouldn't happen. But I think the compelling piece is not so much the race, although that's a part of it. It's all 4 girls, all the little ones and bigger ones. I mean, how they're going to steal, like Chris Cuomo said, the little ones are going to help her steal a car. And they did not even ask her for her license or registration. So that's a story you remember.
Right.
It's not a great one. It's not a great one, but that's a story you remember. But then you also remember those stories of people who have done tremendous kindnesses for people, or who had a miracle in their life. All of a sudden, I have one of a friend of mine who was having some financial issues and happened to see a friend of hers at the post office. This is a true story. And happened to tell the friend just, what she was going through.
Yep.
And the friend said, "Can I help you?" And the next day brought a check to her house. I mean, really. I mean, that's like where did God walk in?
That's compelling. So it sounds like something compelling has to be something that really grabs the listener. That's a topic that they care about. And if you're using your podcast for branding or for expanding your business, the story has to somehow be related to the business so that you get more listeners, more followers, and eventually more clients at using a podcast as part of your broad horizontal marketing.
I think that's part of it, Mary. And I think the other part is it's not just a story. It's also the interviewer style. It's also who is the interviewer bringing on for compelling guests. Is the interviewer doing a format style with a panel, or are they interviewing one person? I'll tell you something that was extremely compelling on a podcast. It's called Gimlet. Gimlet is a big podcast company. And they started, this is about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The gentleman, Alex is his first name. He used to work for NPR, and he created this company. And what he did and it still stays with me today, he actually created a podcast called Startup. And exactly what he did is he took you behind the scenes of all of the pain and everything that he went through. So if he was asking for money from a big venture capitalist, he brought the phone in with him and tape recorded the conversation.
Wow.
Where the guy was saying to him, "Are you nuts, Alex? I'm not giving you this money, blah, 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 blah." And he'd play that. And then he'd come back and he'd say, "Well, now I got to go home and tell my wife. And we've been eating on beans and rice for the past 4 months." Well, fast forward, he's now a millionaire, 1 million listeners, blah, blah, blah. But that was, you just couldn't wait to get back. because they would really tell you, oh, I'm working through the night and I don't know if this is ever really going to happen. And my wife is ready not to talk to me anymore. And I mean, it was just, and then finally there's a conversation with somebody who does believe in what he's doing, and they do it, and they get their $1 million. And it was pretty powerful stuff.
Well, the other thing that I noticed about that story is that it's very personal.
Right.
And so the more you put yourself into it, it seems, the more compelling the story. And being authentic and true to yourself seems to be a key to being successful in any business.
I think that's true. And I'm going to say this on a personal note, but I think more people are willing to share those stories after they've been through it.
Right. Not while you're going through it. It's too painful.
It's very hard to do. It's hard to, you can do it, but you don't have the objectivity because you're getting through it. But I think when you've gotten through it, that's the real example. Although you can certainly still let people know what's happening, as Alex did when you're going through it.
Right.
But there's the silver lining makes a difference.
Right. Exactly. So tell us a little bit more about what do you do when you have a client? How do you get them started?
Well, what I did with these last 2 clients I just had, and I'm still working with them, is I just looked at, what is your vision? What is it you want people to know? What's your story? What is it? What's compelling for you? And one person said to me, I'm not sure this is going to be a podcast, but at least you're helping me to figure out how I want to put this material together because I have so much.
Right. So how do you get people to focus on one thing that relates, so that if they want to do a series, they can talk about an experience that kind of hangs together according to their focus on their business, maybe hangs together with the next podcast.
Yeah.
So maybe you talk one thing, like for me, for instance, I might make a podcast, and this is all very theoretical, about appreciative inquiry. I know nobody here cares about that, but that's one focus area I can tell a lot of stories about. And then the next podcast, I want to talk about emotional intelligence. So those are 2 distinctly different areas that I have stories, that I have real stories, not just this is what it's about, but here's what happened with people that did these things. But they hang together, and they're part of my business strategy to grow my business.
Right. And that can be part of a podcast series that's all about effective communication to keep clients. And in that is emotional intelligence. And in part of emotional intelligence is the empathy, and the empathy requires the inquiring, what did you call it? Appreciative inquiry. Right. That requires empathy. Right. So that all ties in. So it could be a series on the essential ingredients of communication, or communication is key to keeping clients, something like that. And then within that would be different podcasts. One might be an appreciative inquiry, one might be an emotional intelligence, one might be just on empathy.
Right. That's a really great idea, because I'm thinking when we started talking a little bit more about emotional intelligence, there's so many facets of it. Right. And each facet has sub-facets. So you could make one podcast about emotional intelligence, but you could make a series. So that applies to a lot of our coaches who are listening, because we have business coaches, we have financial coaches, we have ADHD coaches. We have one who works with pain. He's a hypnotist and a therapist.
And I think it's good when you can specify. Now, I have a master's in counseling, and I do have a certification as a life coach. And I use those skills, and I'm glad I have the certification. I use them with my podcast coaching. If I do any life coaching, it's more in transition. Mine is more, if you're going from a transition from A to B, that's my sweet spot. But because I really enjoy the podcast coaching and I can use coaching skills there, I focus in. And I think the more you can focus on an area today, I think the better.
Right. Yeah, be specific, but also make it have some relevance to what you're doing.
Right.
what your work is. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work and what you've been up to lately?
Well, I can say something that's, I don't mean to brag when I say this, but I'm very
Oh, go
proud
ahead
of
and brag. Brag. We want you to brag.
it.
We're all about bragging here.
I just found out that I'm a recipient of the Providence Business News Leaders and Achievers Award. This is the
Excellent.
second year, thank you, thank you. This is the second year in a row that it's a new award as of last year. And last year it was called Leaders 55 Plus, the
Right.
55 Plus Award. They've changed it this year. The
Mhm.
people who are recipients are 55 or older, but it's leaders and achievers. So it's
Mhm.
people who have been leaders in the community and done a lot in the community, as well as have achieved a lot in business in their work.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that was really very special. And the ceremony will be on August 20th. Mary, I hope you can come. I'll send you the link, and it will be virtual.
Mhm.
So yes, I have to put together a video, which I'm working on now, a short video,
That's
because it's
awesome.
all going to be virtual. Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Congratulations. That's very good. And you also won another award some time ago, right?
Yeah, in
Small business?
2015, that was the Small Business Administration Award for being a home-based small business. Yeah. So it's a whole other skill.
Right. So
When you become a business person.
when
Yeah.
you work with Patricia, you're working with an award-winning professional.
Well, thank you.
She's been
Thank you.
awarded for her professionalism and her knowledge and her desire to support people and help
Thank
them
you.
get better at what they do.
Thank you. Well, I will tell you that in a while ago now, I won an award for being a radio producer with the national
Excellent.
organization. Yeah, it was the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. And I helped to produce a radio show for a plastic surgeon. And we chose several of them, and they picked one they really liked. And it was about sort of the doctor-patient relationship and bedside manner with a patient. It was a great
Mhm.
interview.
Mhm.
And we got an award for that. So that was the
That's
national one. That
awesome.
was very exciting. It
There's
was a while
another
ago.
example of why you want to work with Patricia. Now,
Yeah.
you know what that brings to mind for me is that do you specialize in any particular field? For instance, as you just said, the medical profession, you received an award for putting
Yeah,
that
yeah. I would say wellness, health, spirituality, success, empowerment, life skills,
together.
any of those, because that's what my radio show is all about. I'm in my 20th year of doing my radio show, and then I did TV before that. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, my subjects are very much empowerment, success, life skills. Um, those are the things that I think I excel in.
So
Now,
tell
I've certainly
just
helped people
for a
put
second,
together financial ones, but that's not my sweet spot.
speaking of TV, tell the audience about the TV show you're working on with PBS.
Well, before COVID-19, I went to PBS in Rhode Island, and just to let you know, it's so interesting. Almost 20 years ago now, let me see, 2000, 2005, I believe it was. No, it was 1996. So it's really almost 20 years ago. Yeah, more than that. I did a video for the North Carolina Public Television station, UNC-TV. I
Hmm.
created it, and I produced it, and I narrated it, and it was called Positive Aging in North Carolina.
Hmm.
Fast forward from 1995 to 2018, when I went to Rhode Island Public Television and said, I would like to produce and host a program on positive aging. And they loved the concept. I wrote it up. And so we did a pilot, and then we produced a promo, and we're now looking for funding. And as soon as we get that, we're going to do this series on positive aging. So it's very exciting that, almost 20 years later, that I'm able to do this now. Everything stopped with COVID. We were about to get some funding, but no, really a lot of the monies and corporate monies went there. So
Right.
hopefully when we get through this, we'll come back to it, because it's already slotted We
Right.
just have to get some of the funding so that we can continue. And I really believe in positive aging, because I think that I think we have some stigma against aging in our country. There's some ageism going on, and you know, it's too bad, because I think there are a lot of people who are older that have tremendous wisdom and skill, and if they work together with millennials and with, you know, other generations,
Right.
then really have a tremendously powerful
Right.
combination.
Right. That's really important, that there's intergenerational communication and
Absolutely.
cooperation. And
Absolutely.
so if you work with Patricia, you get a broadcast award winner, a person who's done 2 TV shows, and somebody who is recognized by her community as an award-winning contributor to the community and to professionalism in this community. So
I
Patricia,
appreciate that.
you're very welcome. Do you have a free download or something that people can take away from today? You can actually just put it on the page if there's a link, or something people can walk away with and say, okay, I've got this little thing that's going to pique my interest in podcasting.
Well, there's a couple things. My website is patriciaraskin.com, and there's a whole section on podcasts. But I also have 2 new one-page websites. One is called improvemypodcast.com, very short. The other one is called produceapodcast.com. Those are both incorporated into my regular website, but I have them as separate sites as well. And I'm offering a 15-minute complimentary consultation, or whatever it takes. If anybody just wants to explore this and talk with me, I'm offering that. So just say you heard it on Mary's Facebook Live or Zoom.
How do we get in touch with you?
Patricia at patriciaraskin.com.
Excellent. Patricia, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but we run into something every week, but this was really great. And thank you so much for helping this group grow and be better and learn more about what you do.
Thanks, Mary. And thanks for your friendship over the years.
Oh, well.
And your expertise and your wisdom and your knowledge as a powerful executive coach.
Thank you.
I've been a recipient of it, so I can give you a big kudos.
Thank you. You're very welcome.